What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 live stream for the Valspar Championship. Going to get you guys ready for all your prop and betting exposure with a look at all your questions down there in the chat, a weather report, some of the shots gained heading into Sunday, as well as some Underdog and Prize Picks props that have already entered myself. Already got a full deep dive out there on both sides, as well as any matchup bets or anything over on the sportsbook side that you guys want me to go through. But it looks like we got Mitch down there, also Jay down there as well. Hopefully you're having a fantastic Saturday wherever you are. We got a little high noon over here. It is a peach high noon that we're sipping on. And let's go ahead and without further ado, hop on in. So the stat averages from today were exactly what we called for, right? I thought right about an even par scoring average, and that's what we ended up getting. And the birdie average went up like we were also calling for, about 3.25 per round. And your bogey average went down to just under 3.2, where I would say maybe the big difference is that the birdie average went up maybe a little bit more than what I thought. It might be closer to 3.2. I also thought the bogey average might be closer to like 3.25 per round. But tomorrow, with the slightly harder setup for Sunday pins, I think that's when we're going to get that kind of setup. So scoring average probably going to be a little bit over par as well, maybe closer to like 0.3 to 0.5 strokes over par, a lot depending on what we get with the weather, which as of right now looks awfully similar to what we had out there for Saturday. So if we go over here to the HRRR model tomorrow, you'll see that they're calling for not a lot of wind for the first maybe half of the day, maybe even 2/3 out there on Sunday, but starting around 4 p.m. local time, the winds kick up to about 8-9 miles an hour. So it's going to get a little bit firmer as the day goes on. That is going to make things a little harder scoring wise, I'd say towards the PM wave. When you add on those winds towards maybe the back nine for those leaders, that could also add a little bit of harder scoring on top of that. So I would say between the morning and PM wave, maybe it'll be about a half a stroke difference like what you had out there for today. And if you split this 0.1 over par scoring average, right, versus the first versus second half, it's right about a 0.5 stroke difference out there between the two halves. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes heading into Sunday. And true, we do have the different pin setup out here for Sunday, but it doesn't look overly brutal. Like there are holes like 16 that look real tough. 13 looks completely impossible, but then you have holes like 2 that are a whole lot softer. 4 is not all that difficult. Like, sure, difficult ones like 5. That's a par 5 and a pretty tricky one there in that back corner. But 7 is a little bit of a gimme birdie look. 10 is a lot easier than what you had for the last few days. This isn't the type of setup where you go, oh, wow, it's Sunday at the US Open or PGA Championship, and they want these guys to play to like a 3 over par scoring average. It is nowhere near that sort of setup. And because the winds aren't expected to get out of hand, that's why I think the scoring average isn't going to move very much. So that's what I've got out there for the scoring for tomorrow. Not going to go fully hole by hole out here with these pin locations. But like I was mentioning before, a few that are kind of tricky, like 17, you add on to the tricky list. 16, 17 there with the snake pit are going to be a little bit harder, I'd say, than the first few rounds. But 18 is an easier pin location than what we typically have. And most times at 18, by the way, it's up on that back right corner. But because they used that pin location during, it was either round 1 or round 2 that they went out there and used it, they can't use it out here for round 4. So maybe it's just because they changed it up what they were doing on certain days. But this round 4 setup maybe doesn't look as hard as what it typically would. So first things we're going to go through over here. So I had a few props I took over here in Underdog, and it looked like every single one of them ended up bumping. So I took this for a 6x payout, and if you took it now, it'd only be a 4x payout. So obviously my Patreon members are where I'm posting a lot of this stuff first. But a lot of other props that I've already entered that I guess we'll take a look at here in a second. So let's start on Prize Picks, which hopefully hasn't been as bump heavy as what we have on these other sites. But a few props that I like over here. So first one would be this under on Corey Connors greens. I also have this over here on Xander Schauffele fairways. And then I also took an under on Luke Clanton strokes. So it looks like all 3 of these are still available. This is a 5x payout slip. We're going to take over here on Prize Picks. And just to go back to the averages out here from round number 3, average for greens was about 10.65 per round. So Corey Connors here at a 14 green projection, you're talking about having to get to 15 to go over, which is 4.5 greens gained to the field, which I'll tell you right now, that is way too high of a projection for anyone out there on tour. I mean, hell, even a Scotty Scheffler, if he was in this sort of field, right, maybe he'd be at like a 14 green projection. And I don't care if it's Jesus walking. I don't care how good this guy is swinging the golf club at this point. I'm not going to take his over at 14 greens. So this is more of an under on principle than anything. Corey Connors, of course, one of the best iron players that we have on tour, also an extremely high green and regulation guy, but the average is 10.6 per round, and it was even lower right out there for rounds 1 and 2. And with some tough pins, like going back to that pin sheet real quick, like 13 is going to be a tough green regulation, 16, 17 is going to be tough, and that's just that final 4-hole stretch, let alone not making any mistakes out there on the first 12 or so holes. So that's why I think that that one would be value out there towards the under. Not that you can't take overs on some of these guys at 11.5, but they're 2.5 greens lower, right? It's just a completely different situation when you've got the Sunday pins and a projection that high. Over here with this fairway one, so the one with Xander over, the average for fairways around here is 7.45 per round. Now, you've got to keep in mind that there are only 13 fairways at this golf course, so a little bit different when it comes to calculating that average. But at this sort of golf course, Xander can have less than an average day, right? He can go out there and hit about 0.5, right? Less than what the field is doing. And he'd go over this sort of line. And though this week has not been very favorable out there for Xander with the fairways, historically, he's one of the more accurate players that we have on tour. I'm talking like a top 50 player on tour when it comes to the driving accuracy stats. Not like a top 10, top 20 player or anything like that. But to go out there and match the field average for fairways is typically something that Xander's doing in his sleep. So at 6.5, this is like a buy low spot over there on Xander. The form, especially him losing over 4 shots gained off the tee today, it has a lot to do with why you're getting him at this sort of number. So, you know, if you're taking the over like I am, you kind of got to know why, right? He's at that sort of projection. But you also know that these players are more than capable, right, of fixing their game after a bad round, especially when they can hit the range the day before, right, before their round tomorrow, and go out there and figure out what the heck was going on. So it's a buy low spot over there in Xander. And then also this under on Luke Clanton, who I just think is a much more talented player than what the board obviously indicates. I have him as one of the better players in this field. Now, maybe not top 5 like he is in some of the weaker field events like we had at the Cognizant, but I've got Luke Clanton as like a top 10, a top 15 player of all the guys that made the cut. So truthfully, I've got him on the same sort of talent level as like these guys at 70.5 strokes. Heck, even some of the guys at 70 strokes, I think Luke Clanton's going to be a much better long-term player. But guys like a Benny Ann at 70.5, like I'd put him on that same sort of level. And, you know, at worst, right, the guys are at like 71, like a Bridgman, right? I'd put him on that same sort of level, like a Harry Hall level, right? That's Luke Clanton at this stage of his career. Long term, I think he's going to be even better, right, than all of those sort of players. So he's got an earlier tee time. Yeah, he's got a 10:25 start over there tomorrow. So not like one of the first few players out, but he'll have a majority of his round in lower winds, right? He's going off at 10, so he'll be done by like 2, 3 p.m. by the time those winds really start to kick up. And he also gets to play with warmer temperatures, right? He doesn't have to go off when it's like 50 degrees in the morning. It'll be 60, maybe 70 degrees out there for his entire round, which I think will be beneficial out there for these given props. So because we got the 1 fade and then the 2 positive stance plays, that's why it's a 5x payout, which on Underdog, that'd be a little bit over 6x actually if you took this same sort of slip, which I think you can get all these props over there. So I've got a bunch I've already taken over there in Underdog, so that's why I chose to take it over here on Prize Picks. But yeah, on the Underdog side, you guys saw a lot of these props that I had that they ended up moving. We'll have to see what they did with the rest of them. So I did have this Victor Hovland prop there, which I think the multiplier got a little bit worse on this over, but it didn't move that much out here on Vic. So let's go ahead and still keep that one in there. And then it was a bunch of fades I took on strokes. So let me throw strokes in here and let's see if we can find those same players that I faded before. So it was Castillo and then it was Echeverria was the other one. But let me see if I can find Nico on here. I believe he's one of the players without a picture. So let's see if we can find him that way. So yeah, he's still at 71.5 strokes. This Castillo prop, though, over here didn't have a multiplier before. So when I took it, it was just even money across the board. Again, guys, right, I've got to post them for my Patreon members before we get on the live stream here. And the payout on this is now absolutely trash. When I took this, the payout on this 3-man slip out, even with the Hovland prop, right, with this sort of multiplier, I believe it was like 5.22x, but because of this 0.94x multiplier, now it's saying 4.79x. So yeah, let's take that one out of there. I mean, I did fade Royo, Hisatune. Who else did I fade? It was Hisatune, and then yeah, it was Jeremy Paul that I faded here. But look at that, right? He's now down at 0.94x. That Kevin Velo one I faded before, right now he's there at 0.92x. So in terms of the lines that are actually still available, this would be the best combination over there on the underdog side. It's 5.1x, so you're still getting a pretty decent payout there. It's slightly lower, right? It's not 5.22x because I believe it went from a 0.83x multiplier there to 0.81x, but it's a much smaller change, right, than what you have with some of those other props. So idea here with Vic, by the way, he's at 4 over here on Prize Picks. So if you're into discrepancies, it's a 0.5 discrepancy right there. But also, if you take a look at his line over here on a site like Draftkings, you're going to see that guys like Hovland are minus 175 for the over. Now, you're paying for it, right? It's got that 0.81x multiplier that you're going out there and including, but I thought it was worth it on a guy who's playing solid golf. His tee to green play has really been carrying him to this point. Right? He's not the sort of player where it's like all been short game out there for Hovland. In fact, if you take a look at the event so far, he's gained over 5 strokes out there with the ball striking. Now, putter's been there too, right? Over 4 strokes in that category, but he's been very sustainable, right? Gaining across 3 of the 4 categories. So that was the idea out there with Hovland. And then these other 2 fades, we'll start with the Echeverria one. He's been super short game dependent. You can see over here, he's gained over 6 strokes putting this week. And usually the first thing to go when you're in contention and you're dealing with nerves, Echeverria, of course, right? He's sleeping as somebody tied for the lead at this point of those 3 players that are there at -7. The first thing to go when you're starting to feel it on a Sunday is your feel, right? You start to hit putts with too much speed, maybe too little speed out there on the greens. You're around the green play, right? Your chipping starts to get a little bit hairy, right? When you get those nerves under your belt. I don't love that for a player like Echeverria that has been really carrying himself in that category. Now, he's been pretty solid out there with the irons as well, but I worry about that style of player. So when I was fading guys like Castillo, right, obviously that one had the multiplier change on it a bit. It was the same thing, right? He gained 5.5 strokes putting, but he's also somebody that's gaining a bunch around the green. So these sort of players in general are ones that I'm looking to kind of take a stand against. You can see Hisatune, right? He's gained like 3 strokes putting. Hisatune's form in general, by the way, started to kind of fall off out there in round number 3. So you can see over here, round 3, right? He lost on approach. His off the tee play wasn't nearly as strong as what it was for the first few rounds. And he ended up shooting, I think, even par today. So what was it, a 71? He went out there and shot, but he's not trending in the right direction. Now has even more pressure, right? Now that it's Sunday and the harder setup out there with the pin location. So that's the idea with a lot of those fades. And it's unfortunate that these lines makers don't really stand behind their projections. Luckily for us, right, Prize Picks hasn't bumped any of these yet. And, you know, I guess knock on wood, cross our fingers, right, that that doesn't happen here too soon. But that is why I have the Patreon page, right? When it is behind there, behind the paywall, it does let these last just a little bit longer than they otherwise would. Luckily, we still have a few props that we can cobble together to go out there and make a slip on. And it wasn't just those fades that I went out there and entered too. They had a Billy Horschel birdie lineup up there at 3.5 birdies. And this was 1.1x actually towards the over. So you can see they took it from a 1.1x multiplier to 0.94x. So they completely flipped it right out here on this Billy Horschel one. And the reason why I really liked that Horschel prop is that he was actually juiced towards the over here on DraftKings. So maybe that's why they flipped around the multiplier, right? They saw this just like I did. But yeah, when that was 1.1x, I mixed that in with a couple other fades that we just talked about, right, without the multipliers, and I got 7x out there for a 3x card. So I know it's got some anti-correlation, right, a multiplier, so no crap, right, it's going to pay more, but 7x for a 3-leg parlay is a pretty decent odds, right? It's about what, a little bit better than what you'd get on sports books, right, out there with these sort of numbers. So sportsbook people that actually have these strokes lines to go out there and bet, especially if you can parlay them. A lot of books won't let you do that, but if you can, you have no idea what you have access to. That's just a gold mine if you could go out there and do that sort of thing. So maybe one of these years we'll get those lines posted on Hard Rock. Fingers crossed that they'll let us go out there and parlay them too. Let me see what we got in chat. What's going on, Antonio? He said thoughts on Lowry tomorrow. So his putter was ice cold today, and then he only 2 back. So I like him for showdown, especially because ball strikers, always what I'm looking for out there round to round. To win the thing, I kind of worry about the shots gained dog, like him going out there and having the stones to go out there and hold on towards the end. It's a big boy golf course, but I really like how like the shots gained look. So just to show you how the shots gained metrics kind of bear out here, let's bring up good old Shane Lowry, luck of the Irish. Hey, it's the week of St. Patty's. Maybe that stands for something. You can see over here today, he gained both off the tee and on approach, but it's been like that the entire week, right? It's not just today that Shane Lowry's been pretty solid. He's gained over 3 strokes off the tee this week, over 3 strokes over there with the irons. I don't know. He's hitting the ball well, that's for sure. He said, just hoping. Sup, Luke? Thanks for the content. Of course, Mike. Thank you for stopping on by. He said, GSL shots gained grinder. That's for sure. We're sweaty tryhards around here. He said he had faith in Xander, then he killed it real quick. Yeah, he didn't have his fastball. That's for sure off the tee. But hey, tomorrow's a bounce back, and he's showing us. By the way, it was an API, right? He hardly made the cut, and then I think he shot like 80 round 3. What did he do out there on Sunday? He shot like a -6. He had the round of the day out there for showdown. Xander's not a quitter. So, hey, maybe you've given up on Xander, but he's not going to give up on himself. Sorry, I forgot to see your question there before, Jay. So I do want to go back to that. You said, my thoughts on Ryan Gerard. So I love him for showdown tomorrow. I'm playing him in my player pool. Here's why. And it comes down to the shots gained approach. First few days, it's been solid. You can see gaining close to 4 strokes in that category, but especially today, right? He gained close to 2 strokes in that category, gained off the tee as well. And just the short game wasn't all that sharp over there around the green and with the putter. So I think that he grades out really well in terms of a showdown play. And I mean, his form's been there too. I mean, he's been top 30ing a whole bunch over here during the beginning of 2025. I think sets up pretty well for this. And I do want to remind you guys where you guys can find my showdown projections over here for round number 4. You may have seen me tweet about it and whatnot over there on Twitter/X. But still doing those, of course. You guys know I do the live streams over there on the Ship It Nation site. But over here on my Patreon page, I do have projections posted out here for round 4. So on there, of course, I've got my player pool tags for my entire pool. I've got to scroll over to the right so you guys can't see it, the entire sheet, right? It's got to stay behind the paywall out there for my members. But not only, right, do you get a tout that tells you who they're playing out there in the 150 max. There's plenty of those out there. Too many, especially a lot that don't even play their player pool out there that say a whole lot of that stuff. But I tell you why I'm on all the plays too, right? So whether it's for placement points on Sunday, well, it's because of their ball striking, short game regression, course history, whether they're high upside birdie makers. You got to have some of those right out there in your player pool as well. I give you all of that over there. And I guess just to show you what the projections look like, we'll go down here to the bottom. So yes, I'm playing some Nate Lashley for some short game regression. So I guess a couple sleeper plays that I'll give you here on the stream. And then also Campos down there is a high upside birdie maker. But you've got ownership on there, projected points, which of course have the placement points accounted for them because it is a Sunday showdown slate. Current score to help with your research, and all the modeling that I do out there for these events. So make sure to check out the Patreon page for all of that, as well as for all the different slips there in Underdog and Prize Picks, which at this point, I think we already have 4 slips posted over there between Prize Picks and Underdog, and they're all 3-leg slips. So that's 12 props that we've already entered. And if you're not even on sites like Prize Picks Underdog, right, you can enter these over there on sites like Draftkings and that sort of thing. And look at this. So I told you, and I was giving the flowers out there to Prize Picks, right, saying like, oh, they're not bumping all this stuff. Corey Connors bumped 1.5 greens. That is a wild bump. 1.5 greens. It bumped down from 14. Yeah, we call that CLV. That bumped 0.5 already over there in Xander. And look at that. Luke Clanton already bumped 0.5. I've got to say, by the way, if your tout, by the way, that you follow doesn't get this kind of CLV, that just means they don't have the respect from the bookmakers. And frankly, I don't think I've seen anyone else out there move lines like I do out here on golf, like in any other sport. Like, sure, if they have inside info, I'm sure that happens. But like, these are just traditional analysis plays that I'm going out there and putting out there. And these guys are moving it like 1.5 greens over there with Corey Connors. I mean, like, come on. I don't know. I just chuckle at this point, right? Because I'm used to it, right? They've been doing this for like 2 years, but geez Louise, like they act like I'm Nostradamus or something. Like I get all my plays right. I don't. Like I have plenty of bad days. I have downswings just like every other bettors out there. But I guess I have more confidence in I do than I do myself, which is crazy. What's going on? What books let me parlay strokes lines? There are a few smaller ones out there that'll let you do it. I think Bet365 used to let you do it. A lot of them took that out when they noticed the correlation killing them on certain spots. like on DraftKings FanDuel, you're not going to be able to do that sort of thing, right? But some of your local books, like Rivers, some of like the smaller books like that, more niche ones, some of them still allow you to do that sort of thing. So make sure to check it out. Check out the rules, right, locally if you can. Jeremy Paul versus Royo for a round 4 matchup. Are you crazy, or is there value on Paul? I would stay away from that one, right? It's like the battle of two shitters there, right? That's a pillow fight if I've ever seen one before. I guess you'd have to tell me what value you see on Jeremy Paul, because I'm not so sure about that. Of course, Jay, you said just stating following on my ex. Thankful for the info. Okay. Of course. You said, bro, it's legit pathetic that these lines makers watch my live. Yeah, I think it's partially people entering the slips too. Like, it's not all of them watching. I'm sure at some points they do, because last night especially, I think they were watching the live stream. But sometimes it's like a bunch of action comes in on these spots and move the lines. Yeah, it's wild though. Everyone else does that and it doesn't work out like that. Have a cash out option for Hovland outright. Should you take it for 11x? 11x on like a 50 to 1. I think he was like 60 to 1, right? Something like that for an outright, maybe 75 to 1 if you got a really good number out there on Monday. I would ride it, man. Here's the reason why, Jonathan. EV wise, it could be close to break even. Most of the time, it's not going to be, right? Because these books, they calculate their implied odds and they scam you on the odds, right? They calculate their implied win opportunity, and then they give you like 80% of what they should, right? Based on that kind of number. So that alone should make it a bad play not to go out there and cash out. But here's the other aspect that you have to think about, right? You lose the sweat of having a Sunday outright. You lose the chance of being able to follow your guy Victor tomorrow to go out there and try and win this thing. Don't give that away for an 11x payout, right? Unless it's something life-changing and, you know, the money would really go a long way with something or something like that, then maybe go out there and cash it out. But if it's just like a few dollars that you throw on them for some fun, then don't cash it out, right? Go out there, sweat out your bet tomorrow on your guy Vic. And I've got to say, I think he's got a good chance to get the job done. I think these weak field events are exactly what he needs to go out there and get back into the winner's circle, because I don't think his form is as bad as a lot of people think. So I'd stick with it, man. That's my take on that, because you lose a lot when you cash out a bet like that. Like, sure, you got the monetary return right there, but getting a guy in contention that you took for an outright bet is something you don't do every single week. So I would hold on to that one. What did I think about Velo today? You thought he battled and shot a respectful +1. So I didn't get to see the round. I was actually out on the golf course myself today, playing a terrible round over there at one of these local munis. So the shots gained, they don't really look that great. So just to show you that over there on Bet the Number here, he lost on approach. I believe his off the tee was pretty sketchy too. So yeah, loser in both of those two categories. He grinded out the score at the short game. So he gained around the green. He gained over there with the putter, which I kind of worry about, right? You're talking about a guy who has missed like 5 of his last 6 cuts, and he usually loses across the board. So yeah, maybe respectful that he went out there and kept it together, but it kind of feels like he's skating on thin ice, I would say, just especially because the ball striking stats weren't that favorable. So what we can do now is we're going to go through some of these matchups and maybe try and find a bet or two to go out there and take. And what we usually look for right out there in our round 4 process are guys that were striping it out there for round number 3 that are matched up against guys that were maybe luck sacking it a little bit with the putter. And going through this, like a Hovland versus Bridgman, at least I think that's the last group. Let's go over here to the matchup tab so we know exactly who's matched up against each other. Let's do that. There's is this the 2-ball? Yeah, okay, so here it is, I believe. So it is Echeverria against Bridgman, actually, that they have for the matchup there, which both of them had the same kind of stat profile. But Hovland versus Castillo, like, this would be a good one on paper, because Hovland went out there, he gained over 2.5 strokes ball striking. Castillo over here, he did actually, I guess based on the round 3 stats, maybe that's not the best example. But if you go to the full event, this is more so what I was thinking about. For the full event, Hovland, you can see over here, gaining 3 strokes out there on approach, also 2 strokes off the tee. Castillo over here, on the other hand, right, he's losing off the tee, and then he's, sure, gaining a little bit over there in approach, but nowhere near that 5 shots gained to ball striking that you have over there for Victor Hovland. So that's why he should be the clear favorite between those 2 players, but it's minus 195 odds, right? So that's pretty trash. I wouldn't want to go there. I do kind of like this Davis Riley versus Jeremy Paul. Davis Riley has elite tier course history here. He nearly won this event in a playoff against Sam Burns 4 years ago. And he's also really starting to play a lot better on approach over the last month or so, gaining about a half a stroke with his irons per round. And he is an elite tier putter over here on these overseeded greens. So against Jeremy Paul, who's kind of like a new guy on tour, right, going to be dealing with a lot more pressure than Davis Riley, who had the win recently and doesn't have to worry about his status whatsoever over the next 2 or so years. He can kind of freewheel it, right? He's been up there before. It's not life-changing at all, right? Him going out there and finishing top 5 this week. Whereas with Jeremy Paul, he has a whole lot more to go out there and lose. So I'm not against this Davis Riley one. And I do want to see what some of the odds look like on these other books. So let me see. Do they have these matchups on here? Let's see. Let's control F this and see if they have those two matched up specifically. So they actually have it Paul versus Hisatune there. So yeah, not the same matchup. And I hate how they do that over here on these different books. Let's see what they have over here in Caesars. So that one is, versus Davis Riley. And Riley is plus 115. But in this one, you have the tie to choose from, which honestly, I think kind of ruins these matchup bets when you take them. And do they have one without the tie, though? If they did, it would be great. They do. So they do have one without the tie there, but he's only minus 105. So yeah, over here in DraftKings, you can get a slightly better number, it looks like, over there in Davis Riley. And I'm not sure if they have this posted over there in Hard Rock Bet, but if I can get plus 100 odds on that, I'm going to go ahead and mix that in because I do think that Davis is the better player. He's got the course history. Shots gain metrics are kind of the same for both. Davis has been luck sacking it a bit this week out there with his short game, but that's what he does on this grass type. He's very familiar on this overseeded. Every single time he plays on it, he's pretty much a rock star. And let me see if I can find him. So we're looking for it's Riley versus Paul. Finding the matchups over here on Hard Rock Bet is just an absolute terrible thing. And they only have it with the tie, it looks like. But he's actually minus 120 out there versus Paul. So they have him as the favorite over Jeremy Paul. These other sites, even Caesars, right? They have Paul as the favorite. This is probably the best number that you're going to find over there on a Davis Riley. So I would nab that at plus 100 if you can. Let me see what else we have on here. So Novak versus Highsmith. It's a little bit of a toss-up there. Horschel versus Connors. Connors has been striping it, so it's probably a stay away for me there. Yeah, like these lopsided matchups, I usually don't play. Like if anything, I'd be looking for the underdog out there in a lot of different cases. Like Velo, I'm not going to play as an underdog just because he's a new cat out there, right? He's got a lot to lose out there tomorrow. Schmid versus Cole, I'd probably lean towards Cole there, but even money odds, I don't know if that's good enough to go out there and take. But Gerard versus Phillips, he's minus 145 out there. I don't know. Maybe we just stick with the one. I mean, in terms of what I think's value, that's probably the best option. Let's look at Hughes versus Perez, I guess. The reason why I want to look at Hughes in particular is he's got really good course history around here. Nearly won this multiple times, in fact, over here around Valspar. Victor Perez, though, before today, was playing beautiful golf, though. So we're going to have to double check on the shots gained metrics on that one. And then Brandt Snedeker, favorite versus Danny Willett. I don't know about that. Like, I know Danny Willett's past his prime as well, but Brandt Snedeker is exceptionally washed up at this point. And that's not meant to be like a diss. It's just true. Like, the guy is like 45 years old or something like that out here on the PGA Tour. But let's go through this. So Hughes versus Victor Perez. So I kind of already know that Hughes has been playing pretty decently this week. So if you take a look at his stats overall, it's mostly been the putting. Today, though, it was the approach play that spiked for Hughes. So that's why I really like Hughes. Course history adds on top of that. And then on the other side of things, you can see Perez actually lost over there with his approach play. And then was pretty sketchy with the short game too. But Perez gained a whole bunch of strokes over there in round number 2 and just kind of fell off over here today. So I'm not against that one there with minus 120. I just wish that was minus 110. You know, it should be minus 110 in my opinion out there on both sides. So let's see what they have over here in Caesars. Maybe slightly better odds in the three-way market. So he's plus 100. And then do they have the other one up? So they do. And he's also minus 120. Ugh, just, it feels like they're taxing on that, right? It feels like they should be giving slightly better odds out there in a head-to-head like that if they truly think it's 50-50.
Let me see what they have over here. So it's Hughes and Perez that I'm looking for. I'm assuming they have one. So yeah, they do over here in Hard Rock Bet. He's plus 100 in the three-way market with a tie. So yeah, that's probably a stay away for me. I like that Davis Riley one a lot more than what I would say over there. And then let's look at Willett versus Snedeker, which I just cannot believe that Willett is the underdog here. So let's see. So Willett gaining a bunch in the short game. Maybe that's why that's the case. If you take a look at the whole week, it's kind of been that way the entire time. And then Snedeker. Let's bring up good old Brandt. It's been the same way. I mean, they're both doing it the same way, right? So it's like, which one do you like better? I know Brandt's actually been playing decent golf lately. Like he's been making cuts out here on tour. Let's look at Danny Willett. Let's see what the hell he's been doing out here, because if it's been anything respectable, then you'd have to think that he should be the favorite. Like he top 10'd at Farbers. That's very impressive. That's a stronger field. Alternate event, he at least made the cut at Puerto Rico. Yeah, I'm not afraid about sprinkling that one. Like there's no way that Snedeker should be the favorite in really any matchup, in my opinion. So he's plus 105, it looks like, over here on Caesars, and then the three-way market is plus 125. So if I was going to bet any of these matchups right now, which it doesn't look like I have the option without a tie over there in Hard Rock Bet yet, so maybe later on when they post those odds, I'll get something close to these two numbers. Yeah, if you give me a plus 100 on Riley, plus 110 over there on Willett, I'm going to be a buyer on both of those matchups. But for the rest of the other slips that I'm taking, other props I'm taking out here for round 4, guys, make sure to check out the Patreon page for all of that. Obviously, behind the paywall, things don't bump nearly as quickly as what we have over here on stream. So, of course, right, if you're watching this live, you could have gotten that prize pick slip, also the one over here in Underdog. But if you want all the other slips that I'm going to be taking for tomorrow, there's no use of me even posting it on Twitter/X, right? If I go over there and do that sort of thing, it'll move in 20 to 30 seconds, I'd imagine, over there on that side. So that's what the Patreon page is for, so you can go and get all of that content. On top of that, of course, we have all the DFS stuff posted over there for Draftkings, out there for Showdown. But that's all over here for round 4. So I am going to check on the chat before we get out of here, get through the last few questions. So if you have any, feel free to go ahead and throw it down below. The last thing I need from you before you hop on out of here, though, guys, is hit me with any of those last second questions, and then also smash that like button, and then also subscribe so you don't miss any of the content throughout the rest of the year. So can I check on the Billy Ho stats? Yes. And the irons were electric. So if you like good iron play, man, that's exactly what you're going to get with Billy Ho here. So let's bring up good old Billy stats and go to round 3. He gained about 3 strokes over there with the iron. So that's part of the reason that I took his over at 3.5 birdies. Guy is just hitting the irons beautifully. And it's not like the putter was terrible today, but he lost about a stroke in that category. So it could have been a lot better. And then he said, is plus 800 for a tie good value for matchups? I've got no idea, man. And I think it depends on the matchup. You know, you've got to find players that are pretty close out there with their talent level. I'm staying away from that kind of shit. Like, I would imagine that there's a certain number, right, where you can get value out there on those ties. Is it plus 800? Is it plus 850? Maybe plus 900? I don't have that answer for you, unfortunately. So, already appreciate you guys stopping by as per usual. Smash the like button if you guys haven't already, and I'll see you guys out there for the content next week.